Start recording. Okay. All right, so what have we got in store for you today? Well, we're going to revisit a case study winner, Leeds Beckett University, and we're going to be speaking with Wendy Luca, Associate Director of Libraries and Learning Innovation at Leeds Beckett University. We're also going to be speaking to Simon Thomson, Head of Digital Pedagogy, Centre for Learning and Teaching. And they're going to discuss the important role of their library and learning innovation services in developing staff and students. And we'll go back to them in a minute, but what I'm going to do before that is I'm going to ask you a question, because we really need help running these 60-minute tech talks, and we need people to present, really. And so we want to know exactly what you want from us, what topics you want us to cover. And I've got like 6 categories there on the screen. All right, and what I would like you to do is just type in the chat which topic you would like us to cover. And you're only allowed to just type in one. I don't want any more suggestions than one. So if you could just type in whether, I think Elizabeth says she can't hear. Okay, hopefully we've got Gareth helping her out there. So could you just type in, all right, somebody's written case studies. All right, we've got training approaches. Okay, wonderful. Student-led webinars. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so it looks like training approaches is the popular topic. All right. I think Moira's typing something. What did you say, Moira? Training approaches. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to move on quickly and just cover the group activities. Now, a lot of you know about the digital capability group and what we get involved in. And what we do is we share best practices via conferences. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste some links in. There you go. So we get involved in conferences, and there's an example. We have videos of some of our past conferences there. We also get involved in Twitter, all right, and we are planning to do like Twitter chats as well. So there we go. There's a hashtag from us. Okay. We also are involved in webinars, just like this one. And if you want to have a look at some of the past webinars that we've done, there's a link there for you. And we have a digital capabilities forum, okay, that you can all join if you want to. Here's the link to the forum. And we also are involved in surveys. So we conduct surveys and we write reports on it, and this case study that we're going to be looking at today is one of the case studies that we got from the survey. So I'm just going to copy 3 sets of links here that I will just paste in here. If you want to know more about the survey and the case studies, there you go. All right, so I've just added those in for you. Okay, so you're here not to hear about me talking about Digital Capability Group and all our activities. You're here to hear about Wendy and Simon's experience in embedding digital capabilities for students and staff. So I'm going to pass the presentation over to Simon. Simon, do you want to take over presenting?
Okay, hopefully you can all hear me. And I should have control now over the slides.
Power.
No, power. Okay, so welcome everybody. So first of all, hopefully you can hear me. If you can, just somebody at least indicate in the box that we're audible. And what we're going to talk about, Wendy and I, today is really kind of our journey, our story of trying to embed digital as part of an institutional culture, and 5 years on from when we originally put forward our case study in 2012. So hopefully you'll get a sense of the kind of things that have changed, the things that we've kept the same. Hopefully it might give you some ideas about how to take forward some of your own digital transformation projects. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Wendy, who's going to talk you through at least the next 4 slides, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, sorry that I can't, I don't seem to be able to get my video to work. Sorry about that. So it'll just be my disembodied voice, but that's possibly better. Just to say, so when we started this journey, Leeds Beckett had very recently had a new Vice Chancellor and a restructure, and at that point we moved to 4 faculties within which we had 18 schools, 3 research institutes and 10 research centres. So it was very much a faculty structure, and within that we had key people to liaise with at faculty level, and then there was a kind of top-down approach, and things used to kind of get cascaded down through the schools. 2,900 staff, as we have here on the slide, and about 1,200 academics amongst those, and about 28,000 students. And we have 2 campuses. We have the city centre campus and the Headingley campus. I don't know if any of you have visited us here in Leeds, but actually they have very different characteristics, both campuses. One is a very modern city-based campus, and the other is a much more traditional-looking campus with very traditional-looking buildings. So that's where we were, where we started. That was kind of the structure we were working in. So then Simon's moved us on to so now where we're at, and have been now for the last, is it about 18 months, Simon, I would say. With our new Vice Chancellor coming in, Professor Petersley, we've completely left the faculty structure behind. So we now have 13 schools and 4 research institutes and 12 research centres, about the same number of staff and about the same number of academic staff and students. So whilst the buildings and everything else seem to have stayed the same, almost everything else has changed, and I would say particularly the way we liaise has had to change. There was very much a faculty-based structure, faculty-based meetings, things happened, albeit a little bit differently given the culture within the faculties, but there was only 4 of them to cope with, and a lot of business was done at faculty level. We've moved to 13 schools, and that has changed things an awful lot, because that is 13 very different sets of cultures and different ways of liaising, because the schools have been given a great deal more independence about how they run things. And then just a little bit about this. Under our previous Vice-Chancellor, we had a strategic plan which had 5 main themes. We had 26 KPIs, and decisions were very much made at faculty level, which I think I covered under the previous slide. So you kind of, in order to get something to happen within a faculty, you knew who your key influencers were, and that's kind of where you went to do your business. Would you agree with that, Simon? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you hoped, then you hoped that then that would cascade down through to school level. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. So 4 faculties felt quite efficient, but actually it did make the communication methods, I would say, probably a little bit more difficult, because you had to hope that cascade would work effectively. But decisions were made at faculty level, so you felt once you'd got the key influencers on side, then your decision was made. And then this is where we are now. We've got 4 main themes in our strategic plan. We've slimmed down to 12 KPIs, and really the most important things is decisions are made at school level. And we're all getting used to that. We've had a review of our academic support structures as well, because naturally when admin went from a faculty level to a school level, 4 teams had to kind of start supporting 13 different areas. So everything has moved around us. So we have continued on this journey of embedding digital capabilities against very much a movable feast of organisational change, cultural change, structural change, and things like that. Now, I'm sure many of you have been in the same position, but that's just to set our particular context here at Leeds Beckett.
Okay, so I'm just picking up here. So the way that the Vice-Chancellor talks about this change is trying to shift us from these huge tankers, which are very difficult to steer very quickly, into kind of a flotilla of ships. So I just thought it'd be interesting to share that analogy with you, because the idea is that each of these ships of varying sizes represents one of the schools, and effectively what they get is a lot more autonomy. Although we're all heading in the same direction, through which that's emphasised by the strategic plan, actually each school actually has quite a lot of autonomy in terms of the way they navigate to get to that direction. And so obviously the reason we wanted to present this is to show you that 5 years on, although digital capabilities is still part of our activity, the way we approach it is actually fundamentally very different, and hopefully you'll see how that has evolved through some of the kind of ways that we interact within our service. So that's just kind of setting the scene really, so you get a sense of structurally how we're now operating within our institution. I also forgot to mention early on that if you do have any questions throughout, I am keeping an eye on the conversation chat window, so feel free to post them and we'll pick some up on the way and perhaps some at the end. So like I say, in 2012 we had a different Vice-Chancellor, a different senior leadership team, and so obviously the emphasis is slightly different depending on the kind of people that are leading your institution. But then the focus was on e-learning and really thinking about e-learning as a driver for increasing staff capability. And what we had within the university then was a separate e-learning strategy and a set of associated KPIs. And again, those KPIs had to be met at a faculty level. So faculties were responding to those institutional KPIs. We had a newly established post of Head of E-Learning, of which that was originally my role. And Wendy interviewed me for that, so thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
And obviously what we had also were these faculty-wide approaches to e-learning, and then the faculties would sort out within themselves how that manifested itself at a more subject or discipline level. It was also at that time that we implemented digital literacy as a graduate attribute, and that was a big part of my role as the head of e-learning, working very closely with Wendy and her team in the library to think about how we develop and implement digital literacy as one of our graduate attributes. Moving on 5 years, and the focus now is shifting around supporting staff in identifying their own digital needs, which I think in itself is quite interesting. So whereas previously we probably said to staff, these are the skills you need, what we began to realize was actually discipline context is absolutely everything. And what we're now getting staff to do is to try and identify their own needs, because we recognize that although there may be some top high level needs that we would want everybody to have, the reality is that in a learning and teaching experience, the context and the discipline is really, really important. We've also done away with the separate e-learning strategy, and what we're doing is embedding digital into a wider education strategy. And again, this is because we want to, we're coming to this idea that actually what we want to see is digital as an embedded part of everything that we do, not this kind of bolt-on strategy or something supplemental to what is our core business. So we've got rid of the e-learning strategy and we're writing digital into all of our other elements of our education strategy. As part of that role, we also talked about the post that I had, which was the head of e-learning, and we repurposed or re-imaged that post as head of digital pedagogy. I'm based in a centre for learning and teaching, so digital is very much a fundamental part of a curriculum development process. And so one of the reasons we changed the post title and also some of the requirements was in that post is so that we see digital as an academic process, as an academic area, rather than seeing it as a technical area. So that, I think, was also an important change. As Wendy hinted at, we've very much moved now to discipline or subject level approaches, working very closely with schools, thinking and working with them very carefully to help them identify what their digital needs are, but also recognizing that their subject and context is so influential over deciding what those needs are around digital that we have to form these two-way communications. But one thing we have managed to maintain, and Wendy might want to say a little bit about this, is that we've managed to maintain digital literacy as a graduate attribute. We've continued that. Now, when we talk about that, we mean that digital literacy is embedded inside the curriculum. I don't know if you want to mention how you've managed to maintain that, Wendy, as part of the library's role working with schools.
Yes, certainly. I mean, we've worked all along with schools sort of at course development level, and then through validation and working on student feedback throughout the lifetime of the course and so on, in supporting academic staff in recognising all the ways in which we can help them embed digital into their curriculum. So, for example, with our reading list system, if we get reading lists that look very print-based, and aren't using aren't including the range of online resources that we know are available in that subject area, then we'll go back to the academic member of staff and say, do you want to include this? If a print book is available as an ebook, we automatically include that without even asking them. We just make sure that's in the list. So that's the kind of thing that we've done. But also, my team, one of my teams looks after the university's VLE. We use Blackboard and we call it My Beckett, and we've developed a template so that staff can use that. It's a kind of based on student feedback about how they like the layout of their modules to look, and continued feedback about they like a consistent approach. We've developed a module which people can use and adapt. We're not saying they've got to use it in the way it is, but just based on feedback that we've had. So those are the kind of interventions we make where we just it's supportive and making suggestions all along and helping people recognise more opportunities to embed digital rather than being particularly we don't want to be dictatorial about it. We want to be kind of supportive and just make as many and just in some ways alerting staff to the range of opportunities available to them, because sometimes it's the case that they haven't realised, for example, that certain facilities are available that they can use with their students.
So I think that's the important point that Wendy picked up on there, is the fact that we don't have a minimum expectation as such for our VLE. So we don't tell everybody what must be in the VLE, but what we do is we provide best practice guidance, and as Wendy mentioned, we provide a template which actually encourages staff to kind of meet a minimum expectation, because within that template are what we would expect to see as a minimum requirement. So although we don't formally say everybody must do this, we actually have found that by using a template that everybody is populating the VLE as we would want it to be. So Fiona's got a question, with no minimum expectation, does that mean some courses don't use the VLE? I don't know the actual statistics, but I'm pretty confident that 100% of our courses has some kind of presence in the VLE or in an alternative VLE, which some of our colleagues use in art and design. I don't know what you know about that, Wendy.
I don't know what the percentage is, but it's very high, and I think that any modules that don't have an active presence in Blackboard, I think as you say, would be explained by them having modules encaged. But actually, we use Blackboard both as a portal and a VLE, and have developed a pass-through from the portal element. So we use the communities part of Blackboard as a portal, so all students can log into that and get access to a range of services, really well populated with connections to all kinds of things, their timetables, their email, their council tax exemption form, I'm just trying to think of the widest range of things I can that's in there. But we've also embedded links to Caged, which is the alternative VLE. So actually they're coming through, they can go directly to Caged, but to get access to the fullest range of services that they have access to, they do need to log in through Blackboard. So actually the student take-up of Blackboard is extremely high.
So Fiona's other question, what's Caged in? Well, Caged is actually being written by colleagues in art and design. It's more of a portfolio platform that's been developed in-house by them, but they obviously developed that because they felt it was a preferred kind of approach to their particular practice. And I think that is kind of our philosophy, is that we will always provide a university-wide system that the university supports that meets the needs of probably 95% of all of our staff and students. But where schools decide, for example, that they need something that's slightly different, they would then need to go and either provision that in-house or seek to explore that externally, but that would have to align to university systems. And I think what we've kind of begun to explore is how do we make sure that the tools and services meet the needs of staff and students without being too prescriptive, but giving them enough flexibility to kind of make it their own, if you like. I think this slide here kind of summarizes where we were and where we are now. So whereas e-learning was kind of a bolt-on to the curriculum, we've now got it as an embedded activity. So we get our staff to write digital into the validation document. So for example, when staff are writing their validation for their courses, there's a section in there called blended learning, and staff have to write a narrative on how they're blending the learning with digital tools. And that's quite an interesting process. Just adding those things to validation documents can get staff to really think about digital tools in a different way. And also this idea of moving from one size fits all to kind of a more joined up, discipline specific, tailored approach gives, I think, a lot more ownership and responsibility actually back onto the course teams to make sure they're giving a good digital experience, but also makes the services within the university respond and adapt. So rather than kind of giving the requirement out to schools, they're actually responding to what the needs of the schools are. Then I think we've got a shift from technology required to technology selected. So there is no requirement to use any particular technology in any course delivery. If the course is doing a good job and the students are really happy and the staff are really happy, why would we force them to use technology if they don't need it? So we have some courses, for example, like English literature, where they're not huge users of the VLE space, because actually what they really like doing is meeting up and talking about the literature that they've explored together. So they really enjoy the face-to-face experience. But where they have leveraged the power of digital is obviously around using ebooks effectively, generating discussion boards for starting conversations. But we wouldn't prescribe that they had to use the VLE in a particular way, because only they know best how they want to integrate technology.
Can I just use an example there, Simon?
Yeah,
if you don't mind, just because I think it's quite a strong one. That, as you say, that's an area where they've traditionally really not actually been keen on using the online environment, and a lot of I'm from a library background, and a lot of libraries will probably sympathise with me, where we've had in the past we've had quite low NSS feedback from that subject area about access to books and being able to provide a broad enough collection to meet the needs of literature students, and who in their third year are needing to do a dissertation, at which point their needs explode, in needing a much wider range of reading. And actually where we've had a massive success is using student-led purchasing I don't know if people are aware of this, where we can buy a set, well, we don't buy actually, we load a set of catalogue records onto our catalogue from our supplier. And so those are available to students, and once they've used them, once the title has been used, say, twice, it becomes a purchase and added to our collection as an ebook. And our satisfaction ratings for that area, we've really concentrated. We've used, what we've looked at what the subjects of their dissertations have been over the last couple of years. We've used that to select the resources. We've made the resources available in a timely fashion, and our NSS results in that area have they've risen remarkably. And so from an area that wasn't at all keen on using online resources, actually where the use of those of ebooks, for example, as an example, has really met a specific need. It has made a massive difference to student satisfaction and student outcomes. So that has been I think that's a particularly good example of a tailored solution.
And I think that kind of shows how we've shifted from it being strategically driven to being strategically supportive. Mm-hmm. So thinking about how these digital tools are supporting that learning and teaching experience. Mm-hmm. And obviously we've had to make progress in the last 5 years around shifting the focus from PC based to including apps and mobile and so on and so forth, as we've seen that expand, the use of that expand across the campus as well. The other thing that we just wanted to talk about is how we approach the digital development of our staff. And I just wanted to reference this model because this is the model by which in the Centre for Learning and Teaching we connect together this idea that within academic staff development we want staff to be proficient in 3 core areas, if you like. One, I don't know if you've ever seen this model before. It's called the TPAC framework, and it's quite well utilised in teacher education actually, but the fundamental principles behind it I think hold a lot of value in higher education academic development. And what the framework suggests is that in order to be a really good, competent, modern teacher, if you like, an academic, you need to be proficient in 3 areas. One is content knowledge, which is really your subject expertise. The second one is pedagogical knowledge, so that you understand, the science around learning and teaching. And then the other one is technological knowledge, so which we frame as digital skills. And what we're aiming to do is really get our staff to recognise where they already have strengths, mainly in their subject expertise, and where they need particular development. So we already have, for example, our PG CAP, our Postgraduate Certificate in Academic Practice, which is largely focused around developing pedagogical knowledge. And then my role is to help develop staff technological knowledge, with the idea being that we want our staff to feel as if they're proficient in all 3 of those areas to maximise their ability to understand how to use digital tools. And one way that we frame that is around this what we call digital pedagogy, hence the title of my role. And it's not telling everybody they must use digital. It's really getting them to understand in a kind of critical pedagogical perspective when they should be using or when they could be using digital tools, but also making decisions about when not to use them. Because we can probably all think of examples where people have used digital tools and technologies and it hasn't gone very well, which has actually been detrimental to the experience of either the staff or the students. So the approach that we're taking is very much that staff begin to identify what their needs are. We guide them in that because obviously we do have expertise in providing advice and guidance, but at the end of the day it's up to them to decide how it fits within their curriculum, and it's up to them to decide whether they want to use digital tools as part of a learning and teaching experience for them and their students. So an example of what we do is we've just recently run something called Deep Digital. So DEEP for us stands for Developing Excellent Academic Practice, and it was a week-long series of face-to-face and online events and activities, of which the library, Wendy's area, distance learning unit, and ITS were all involved. So we don't kind of separate our services out. We bring any service that's involved in digital tools and technology together to run this week-long events. We run it around regular time slots, so there's always something going on at 11 a.m., 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. daily. And this is the first time we've run it, and we ran it actually the week before induction, so we might change that next year because it's quite a busy week. But we had about 126 staff signed up for a range of activities over that week. Louise's just put in a question, 8 p.m. And in fact, what was really interesting about that is that the 8 p.m. slots were some of our busiest. So we had like 15 or 20 staff joining us remotely for activities at 8 p.m. And I think it also, one of the things we identified was part-time staff that aren't on campus as much as our full-time academics can also engage at 8 p.m. and it actually became quite a popular slot, and so we're definitely going to be running more events, if you like, out of hours, and of course some staff won't join those events out of hours, but I think having alternative opportunities to engage in activities and development means that what we're doing is increasing the breadth of access to kind of our development resource. So we're definitely going to be running those. So you can see there some of the comments. I love the late night online sessions, enjoyed the online sessions, really like the fact that some of the sessions were online. So trying to give staff an experience that we might want them to give our students is really interesting as well, because the staff realise that by using these tools they can be giving quite a beneficial experience to our students. So I'll just hand over to Wendy, who's now going to pick up kind of the development of our digital literacy and some of the work that we've done around that.
Yes. Okay. So so the digital our digital literacy attribute. So we have it starts with the objective of the attribute, which is defined as the confident and critical use of information and digital technologies to enhance academic, personal and professional development. And it was then broken down into 7 subcategories. These were very much based on some work done by JISC, and I can't remember, I'm afraid, the exact reference or the exact publication that we used, but we would be able to circulate that if people were interested. But what we intended to do was, and we worked with the student union as well. The Vice President of Education at the time was really invested in this, and we also worked on a higher education. What was it called, that project, Simon? It was a higher education.
It was a Change Academy.
Change Academy, that was it, in developing this as well. So we worked with the Students' Union in kind of coming up with this definition and making sure that people understood what we were getting at and that it covered the kinds of things that they would expect it to. Now, this was probably developed, probably about 8 years ago now, and looking at it now, it looks to me it's not doing the thing that we now say we want to do, which is to be subject and discipline specific. It's trying to cover all areas and have something in it for everyone. And I think, and I've got this in our concluding remarks as well, what we need to do is come back to this, pare it down, I think, make it simpler and more agile, so that when we're talking to course teams about it, or to students about digital literacy, we can adapt it more readily to their subject area, their discipline. So we'll come back to this. I mean, I think it served us well, and it helped. Certainly when we were introducing it to academic staff, it really helped us to explain to them the breadth of what we were thinking about. But I think now we're at a stage where we can probably step back from that and maybe simplify and start from maybe a narrower focus and broaden out from that, depending on how far they can go within their discipline. Would you agree with that, Simon?
Yeah, I think what happened when we were defining this, I think what we wanted to do was make sure that we were clear by what we meant by digital literacy. Yes. Because obviously what we recognised as part of the project was everyone thought digital literacy was something very different to each other, and we needed some consensus by which the university would move forward. Yes. And actually, this is a very narrow version compared to the kind of really broad perspectives that we got on
Yes.
digital literacy. So I think Wendy's right. I think now that we've kind of matured a little bit around understanding digital literacy, it's an opportunity now to revisit this and kind of think about it and summarize it much more succinctly, I think, which will benefit us and our academic staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so where we are now is that digital literacy is embedded at all levels of undergraduate courses at validation stage. Now, our perspective on that is that is very much tailored to the needs of the course. So for example, I'll use the information literacy element of digital literacy. We might do, if it's, say, a computing course, they might not need much at the beginning of the course, but we might come in quite heavily at level 5 or 6, depending on the kinds of work they were doing. So it's timely interventions. So we're not saying you've got to have something in every module at every level. It is, where is it most relevant? When is the intervention going to have the most impact on your student experience? Digital literacy is written into learning outcomes, and they are integrated. And optional around some of the options that we have are embedding digital literacy into postgraduate courses, and we're doing that more and more. And in fact, we certainly realise that, say, for example, master students who've been out for a while certainly need quite a lot of intervention at the beginning of their course to help them in that transition back into education. And as I was saying just previously, we need to work with course teams to decide which modules are the most appropriate to have digital literacy embedded in them, and when are we going to have those interventions? When is the most impactful time to go in? I'll give you an example from last year, which we were thrilled about, because one of the things that we find most difficult is to prove what difference we can make to students with our interventions. And I'm talking from the library perspective. I have to say, I'm sure a lot of libraries really struggle with that, proving, we made this difference. Anyway, we had a particular intervention in accountancy at level 6. We're more and more bringing together our general academic skills provision with our digital literacy and information literacy provision. So we're seeing it all joining up together much more seamlessly. And anyway, we went into a level, one of our team went in at level 6 and did some work with some accountants who had traditionally not had to research much literature, write long pieces of work, because it wasn't part of their discipline. Our tutor went in, did a session, and the module tutor reckoned that she had made a 3% improvement on their outcomes on previous cohorts because of that intervention, and that was at level 6. So that's what I'm saying about, where we do it and when we do it can make a big difference. And we don't want to be too prescriptive about that. We just want to be helpful and discuss with course teams when we think the intervention will be most beneficial on both sides. Again, which subdomains of that definition that we showed you on the previous screen are most relevant for them, because some of those things won't be particularly relevant for some courses. Which tools are used, raising awareness of which tools may be most effective. I'll give an example I would give would be that we have had PebblePad, the portfolio system, for some years now. And when we first got it, there seemed to be a kind of institutional angst about making sure that it had as broad a take-up as possible. And we kept being asked to demonstrate what percentage of courses were using PebblePad. And we seemed to be being judged on the success of our implementation of PebblePad on how many courses were using it. And that's not the right way around, because it's not needed for all courses. It doesn't suit all courses. We've had real impact, say, in health, in some other social sciences courses. It just depends on the discipline. So, so we work with the teams to help them decide which digital tools are going to be the most appropriate for them, and then also how they assess. And again, as Simon said, very much an approach. There are, we have online submission and assessment available, and we encourage people to use that, but they can use the tools to an extent. They can use the tools of their choice. And again, there's that thing about making sure that we offer an appropriate, high-quality set of institutional software and tools and technologies that we know can support our staff in delivering a good educational experience for our students. If they want to experiment around that, sometimes we have to say, well, you have to make sure that you can support that because it's not part of the institutional set of tools. So, we don't say you're on your own, but we do say, make sure it works properly and make sure you can offer a good student experience. But other than that, people can experiment around the edges.
Yeah, so I suppose on the left there where it says required, those are the only required elements of digital literacy. The only thing that are required is that it's embedded at all levels of undergraduate courses. So not in every module, but it has to be at least embedded at every level. That to do that, it has to be written into learning outcomes, because we do follow kind of a constructive alignment model. So what we kind of articulate is that if you write it into learning outcomes, that should manifest itself in assessments and manifest itself into resources for delivery of curriculum. And that digital literacy is seen as an integral, integrated set of skills, not separate. So we got rid of what we used to have were key skills, and where everyone just did a tick box exercise. And what we ask staff to do is when they write and validate their courses is that they identify the digital literacy skills that are very particular to their context. So they have to work with employers and gauge the kind of digital literacy skills that are required, as well as working within professional bodies to work out what digital literacy skills are required, as well as then thinking about what academic digital literacy skills are required, and they have to write all those into the course. So it's a way of ensuring that it is there and that it can't be missed, because if students are passing learning outcomes and those learning outcomes have been written with digital literacy within them, then we know, or we have a great deal of confidence that it's the students are actually developing those skills. So that is at a course level, Fiona. The question there is that at a course or module level that digital literacies have to be identified? So it has to be in all levels of our undergraduate courses. So within a course, obviously, you have a set of modules, and you have level 4, level 5, and level 6. So it doesn't have to be in every module, but it has to have been assessed at least once through a learning outcome at every single level of study. And that's the only requirement that we have. Now, most of the time, there's more than one module that will be developing and assessing digital literacy at each level, but that is just a minimum requirement. And then the things on the right are optional. Some staff, like Wendy noticed, are embedding digital literacy into postgraduate courses, which is great. It's not a university requirement. Like I say, many staff do embed it into more modules than they need to, which is also great. And as Wendy also alluded to, they get to select, if I just go back, which of these subdomain areas they want to include. They don't have to include all of them either, because it's content specific. So
and they may ramp them up. I think the point I was trying to make is, whilst it must be included at all levels, they might really ramp it up at some point or other, depending on the discipline, because a particular need may arise at a certain point in the course, and they've really then it ramps up in terms of how it's included in a module or a number of modules.
And this very much aligns with the philosophy which we tried to explain to you, which is, how do you develop a process which has enough structure to make it happen, but enough flexibility to ensure that it's really meaningful at kind of a really local context level. And you can see that that's how we've kind of what we've emerged with is this kind of approach, a very high top level requirement without any of the detail, and the detail is then manifested itself much more locally. So the question is, how do we support that? Because obviously it's really, really important that we provide enough effective support and guidance for staff, and a lot of the work that Wendy does, and the work in the library and learning innovation teams, and a lot of the work that I do and we do in the Centre for Learning and Teaching is actually about providing support and guidance. I think one of the things that's important to know is that we're not actually responsible for policing any of this. So the policing, if you like, or making sure that digital literacy is written into validation documents, is the responsibility of our quality assurance teams. And I think that means that we have a really nice relationship with colleagues when we're actually supporting them in writing it, because they know that we're not going to be policing it. So we can have some really candid discussions. But a lot of our support is about evidence-based. So the link that I've given you in the conversation window is actually a link to this guide, Embedding Digital Literacy as a Graduate Attribute, and you can have a look at it by all means, and you'll see within there that it's a lot of evidence-based, so it's also got a list of the references that we've used. We then link that kind of document to a set of workshops where staff might bring course documentation, module documents, and we would then kind of unpick their modules and talk about how they could embed graduate attributes. We also have a single point of access which we've just developed this year. I'll just put a link to that in because it's publicly available. Bear with me. I've tried to copy it but it didn't work. And that is a single point of access for any of our resources. So staff can go in there, and what it is we've designed it a bit to be a bit more like Google, if you like, that the approach to it is you don't have to know where everything is. You just need to know the kind of things you're looking for. So if you went to that website and did a search for digital literacy, for example, it would list all the resources that we have. And it's starting to rank those resources based on the ones which are the most popular. So hopefully we're becoming a bit more adaptive and tailored in our resource approach. And then obviously there we've got tailored sessions, and the teams in library and learning innovation do a lot of tailored sessions. I don't know if you want to talk about the academic librarians, Wendy, because I think they're key to that, aren't they?
Yes, certainly. I mean, now they, well, both the academic librarians and we also have a team of academic skills tutors. And I think I mentioned just before, what we're doing more and more is, so the academic librarians work at a subject level. It's a very traditional liaison model where they are, they specialise in a subject area and liaise with particular schools. So they'll work with course teams, as I said, to kind of agree where the most effective interventions will be and at what points they should come in and support students with referencing, with effective search techniques, with accessing online resources and all that kind of thing. But we're finding more and more that they can work very effectively with our academic skills tutors. So they might do, the academic librarian might go in and do a session on preparing for your first essay. How do you search for the resources? How do you use them most effectively? Followed, by a session from one of our academic skills tutors on critical thinking and how to structure the essay. So what we're doing is not looking at these skills in isolation, but more and more working with course teams to look for opportunities to make very natural linkages between these skills, because of course then none of them are isolated. So if we do isolated sessions, I don't know if the students always join it up to the piece of work they've got to do, whereas if we can do something that takes them through a continuum of development, I've learned how to search for my resources, I've learned how to reference them properly, I've learned how to structure my essay. We've given them we might even have gone in and done a session on how to use Word to best effect to write a report, say, for example, and then that is a joined up package for them, and then they're kind of ready to roll, if you like, in terms of doing their assignment. So we've certainly that's something we're working on very hard at the moment, and I can see we're having more and more success with that. Even in the last kind of academic year, that's the demand for that kind of thing has grown.
Yes, so tailored sessions is becoming a big part of the work we do, because everyone comes with a slightly different need. And
Yes,
it
yeah.
means it's more resource intensive for us,
Yes.
but actually it's a much better experience for the academic staff when we do that. The other one that just at the bottom, we kind of like to share stories, and I put a link in there to a YouTube video of just one of the stories that one of our academic staff has told about their experience. And they, they're rough and ready, some of these stories. We just get a camera and we go and film them somewhere, and we don't really polish them up, but actually it's real. And I think the idea is that if you can tell people's stories, then that can help relate to other people's contexts and situations within there. So Liz has asked a question: what training provision is there for professional support staff? Well, in the Centre for Learning and Teaching's point of view, as part of our PDR process, obviously we identify training and resource needs annually, and what we do is we think about what we need to strategically achieve, the kind of work that we might be involved with, and then we make sure that we provide the support for our staff. The Library and Learning Innovation Service is a much bigger service, so I'll let Wendy talk about how they kind of offer training and support for their professional staff.
Yes, so certainly, so academic librarians, when they're new in post, if they don't arrive with a teaching qualification, we put them through the standard, the PG CAP, which is the standard qualification that our new academic staff do, and they achieve their HEA fellowship through that. So we've had really good success with, we expect all our academic librarians to have a HEA fellowship within a year of starting with us, but actually we've stretched that now, and some of our learning systems staff, so they're the ones that support the VLE, have achieved HEA fellowship, and they also, we've been encouraging them to get the CMALT accreditation. And then also the next, there's all working within the library academic support team. We also have information services librarians, and again we would encourage them to get teaching qualifications. But we also support staff in in learning how to use all these technologies. They go out and about to conferences and to exhibitions and so on, and to explore what tools there are out there, because we don't want to use the same set of resources all the time. They're out there exploring what looks like it would be a useful tool for their for their subject areas, and kind of work with academic staff to see if that would work for them. So but I think we've always had quite a strong reputation as in developing our staff, and we're very keen that they have that they can go out there that they're confident in their teaching, and that they're respected as members of teaching teams. That they're acknowledged as making a strong contribution. And if I can just go back to that thing I was saying earlier about the tailored sessions, for example, the DEEP conference, which I think you mentioned, Simon, which is the annual conference, our main teaching and learning conference. I mean, we use that as a showcase for staff, just showing them the kinds of things that we can do to help them in delivery. And this year we concentrated on this kind of joined up approach of the different elements of academic and digital skills that we can help them with, and gave some examples of the kinds of sessions we can run. We ran that session twice, and it was clearly a real eye-opener for some others. So, just keeping promoting that message, and also getting our staff to mingle and communicate as much as possible with their academic colleagues, so they understand their needs and the needs of the curriculum as much as possible, I think is really important.
So we've just got about a minute left before I hand over to Lorraine. So we just had a couple of slides to say, where do we need to go from here? And I'll try and rattle through those as quickly as we can, I suppose. If I do this page, Wendy, you can do the next page. So obviously what we want to do is we need to continually raise academic staff awareness of what support and advice is available, because quite often you'll come to some staff and they didn't even know that these support services were available. So we've got some work still to do there, I think. As Wendy mentioned, we probably want to revisit our digital literacy definition. I think now it's well embedded and understood, we can begin to simplify and clarify that. We've also got developed this year an online course to support students coming into our university. So we've developed an open online course for incoming students, and I think that's part of their own digital capability development, because actually that course is delivered through our VLE, so they get a taste of our VLE before they even come here. We're consolidating our approach, so we've got that single point of reference for resources, which is a joint service provision. So rather than going out to all these different service pages, staff just need to go to one place. And also increasing self-efficacy in staff digital development, so they begin to identify what their own needs are, and then they come to us and say, oh, can you support me to get here? And I think that's beginning to evolve as a culture as well, which I think is really, really good.
And then yeah, equally swiftly, we need to improve cross-institutional engagement. So, you know, some schools definitely are more engaged than others. In Libraries and Learning Innovation, we're developing annual reports now, which are very much a dashboard approach, where we're really demonstrate. We've got very good usage stats now. We've got very good data, and we can say to schools, look, you know, this course used these tools or accessed our training this many times, and their NSS scores were this. And this course, by contrast, used us very little, or their students accessed our e-resources very little, and look, their NSS score is this. So, you know, we're getting better and better data that I think will help us with that message. So I think that covers that next point as well. You know, more closely link digital development to improve KPIs, but use an evidence base to demonstrate that. Increase our support resources in that joined up way we've been describing, and that thing about demonstrating improvements in student outcomes, as well as importantly the staff experience, and that linkage that there is to staff engaging with the tools, and that transmitting to the students is also a really important one. The next one I think is you really, Simon, isn't it? Your student digital champions, really expanding how we can use them and making the most of that.
So we recruit students across the university to come and support us in the development of staff, and I think, and working on projects with us, and that's been quite fruitful. So we need to formalise that a bit more and slightly adapt the model, but that has been working.
And then trying to make sure that, because our estate strategy is ambitious at the moment, we've got a lot of development going on, and we need to make sure that the new spaces are set up to deliver, to allow staff to deliver the digital experience in a seamless and efficient and effective way for them. And I'm sure this is a challenge of many universities, but also that the students have a very smooth experience as well, and they don't come to university and feel like it's it's a less good experience than they might have using the Wi-Fi down the local cafe, for example. And also that thing about providing spaces where staff can experiment with technology, have a go, gain confidence, and know that when they go into the classroom it's going to work for them. Those two things are quite linked, aren't they, Simon, really?
Oh yeah, they are, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's our story. We're nearly up to the edge of time, but I've put, if there's any questions, please do pop them in there, but in the meantime I'll hand back to Lorraine for closing.
Oh, thank you so much, Simon and Wendy. That was truly wonderful. If you do have any questions, is it okay for them to email you at all, Simon?
Yes, of course.
Could you put your email address in there for us?
Yep.
So if you have any questions, please send an email to Simon, and I'm sure he'll try to help you, try to answer it. I'm just going to take over from the presentation. We don't have much time really, and I want to just quickly tell you what to expect next month. We're going to have an update from Cardiff University about using Office 365. The first time that they actually presented, it was very popular. We had over 150 people that actually attended, and I think we ran out of time as well there, so we're going to revisit them for an update. So please book on to that if you can. And I'm going to have to just say goodbye and thank you very much for all attending until the next time. Okay, so I can see some questions going on. If you want to type your messages in there, I'll keep the recording going for another 2 minutes or so that we can have this recorded. So thank you very much and goodbye, everyone.